Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I am your host, Jed Appleruth, and tonight we're talking about two topics that I really do enjoy very much. Helping kids with learning differences, ADHD, kids who are twice exceptional, managing anxiety, and managing levels of motivation. Because sometimes kids who have learning differences, we know they experience higher rates of anxiety on average. And also there are times when there's frustration and things can often be perceived as they're low motivated, when in fact they're actually dealing with other issues and they're frustrated and things are a little bit harder. So the name of the game is strategies, giving you strategies to help when there's anxiety, and also giving you strategies to help if you're perceiving some frustration from your kids. They don't want to start tasks. They're checking out some. I've definitely worked with students over the years who, with frustration, they begin to unplug academically. They have challenges. Things may, in fact, be harder for them. And so sometimes they start to unplug and go to other areas. If things are, that they may start going into more gaming or more social, or things that pulling them away from academics if they feel frustrated, if they feel overly challenged. So we have a lot of content on anxiety, and then some good content on motivation, and then hopefully at the end we'll have some good Q&A. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in? So let's do it. So first, kind of a general primer. We're talking about students who have differences. Neurodiversity. It's a concept that every brain is different. We have our own challenges, our own strengths. Different parts of the brain develop asynchronously. If you have ADHD, certain parts of your brain are really developed. Could be your language skills, other issues, but the frontal cortex is still coming online. By definition, if you have ADHD, a part of it is brain development difference. How you think, how you focus, how you attend, how you inhibit distractions, your ability to manage and organize and coordinate things. That comes on later, and ADHD brains are a couple of years behind on average, but they definitely eventually get there. And so, but because of these differences, sometimes there's higher levels of frustration, other things as, they're trying to manage with, brains that are a little bit different. So these are biological differences. We do know there is a very good overlap of kids who have ADHD. There's a very strong chance that they also have some other learning disability. These tend to go together, called comorbidities, or things working together. Dyslexic kids have a much higher rate of ADHD, and quarter kids with ADHD also have dyslexia. And I've worked with kids with both the spectrum. Also, there is overlap with autism spectrum disorder. We used to call them, Asperger kids, or light, on the spectrum. But there's definitely overlap. Kids on the spectrum often have ADHD. So there's a lot of overlap here. And so kids have to understand, how does my brain work? What's the right context? What do I need to do well? But definitely sometimes there is a greater level of anxiety dealing with these challenges and things. And also, there's some frustration because I have to work harder than my peers, and that can be frustrating. I have some students who are dyslexic. They have to work 3 times as hard in terms of doing their homework. It takes longer, and that can be frustrating. And so it's understanding, how do I support my kids going through this and be nurturing and empathic and help them be successful. So that's tonight. So when you're working with kids who are neurodiverse, like your kids on the webinar tonight, empathy, patience, positive reinforcement, these are essential, because our students who are dealing with these extra challenges typically are going to have more negative self-talk. They may have developed more of a negative academic self-concept. They may start checking out because it is harder, and that is an objective truth. But part of it is sometimes the challenge. It helps build resilience and build character. The great dyslexics like the Steven Spielbergs and the decathlete, who then got really, really famous and is now trans. He said, there's a comment back in the day that, but for his dyslexia, Bruce Jenner, I would never have won the decathlon. That going through the experience of that frustration and the challenge, having to work so much harder than my peers, formed who I was, and it helped me later in my career, in my life. But definitely in the beginning, it is harder, objectively. And students who are having to work harder, oftentimes they have higher levels of anxiety. Because am I going to have enough time? Am I going to have enough, to finish the assignment? It's easier for that person. It's harder for me. That can create some stress, some arousal. So part of it is, being understanding, checking in, how everything's going with these kids, being flexible, working with them. But anxiety is our first major topic. And part of tonight is giving you strategies, things to think about, things to try to help your kids who might be experiencing higher levels of anxiety because of their neurodiversity. Anxiety is a very American phenomenon. We have more anxiety than other countries. That's measurable. And about 1 in 3 people will have an anxiety event clinically diagnosed during their lifetime. So anxiety is something that we do a lot of. Could be our position in the world or our resources or whatever it is, but we definitely have more anxiety. And the mental health of teens has declined in the past decade, even before the pandemic. And some people are looking at the smartphones and how we're looking, we're spending too much time on our devices. But there are higher rates of anxiety globally, not just in EE kids, but in the general population as well, in neurotypical students. There is more depression. The pandemic wasn't a friend to anxiety. There was a lot more anxiety. Mental health did decline for a time, and there's some factors afterwards. So still, there are other stressors, things we're learning about. If you're not a little bit anxious about what's happening with the environment or the climate or the floods, I think you aren't paying attention. Ultimately, the virus can still scary. External wars, thinking about college and the price of college and student debt. There are things out there, and also the basics of, going to prom or friends and rejection, getting into certain clubs, activities. So there are, and how many likes did my post get? These kind of things. There are definitely lots of stressors that kids face. And compared to our generation, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. There's more stress on kids on average now than was on us in the 80s and 70s. And the pressure to excel is starting earlier. It's more competitive. And we're asking more of our kids. And so the brain development, especially of EE kids and neurodiverse kids, is it ready to handle this informational flood that they have to wade through, coming at them constantly? Sorting. So it's more challenging when your brain's trying to manage all of this. And again, collectively, there is a higher level of anxiety. One of my colleagues talked about, even with Uvalde and school stuff and school shootings, that can create fear just going to school. And we do know that anxiety picks up and there are more hospital visits, for mental health during the school year than over the summer. So the school is part of it. Being in school can be a anxiety picker-upper. So part of it, when you're talking about anxiety with your kids who may come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I'm anxious, I'm nervous. They may say that, or they may just start manifesting certain behaviors. And part of it is, how do we frame anxiety? How do we talk about it? Because we all experience stress in life, and stress is a normal condition. Without stress, we're not going to live our best lives. Stress makes us rise to occasions. But sometimes going from I have some stress, I have some worry, to I have anxiety, and then clinical anxiety. These are different things. And there are times we're jumping to pathologize something that's more natural. So how we frame it, how we talk about it can matter and can affect things. So anxiety is that sense of fear of what's coming in the future. I'm afraid of what's coming, and I feel disempowered about my ability to manage myself in the future and navigate things. So stress is normal. There's stress if I have a test, if I have an assignment, there's some stress. If I have a lecture tonight, there's some stress. But anxiety, I perceive it as a threat. This might really hurt me. And when you're afraid, the locus shifts from what I can do right now, and you become more disempowered, more helplessness. If I get to the anxiety place, then your thoughts get circuitous, not how do I get into action? How do I start working, versus now I start dwelling on the possible negatives. And you always want to guide people back to the problem-solving centers, which is in fact the frontal cortex, like the limbic system. The midbrain is where anxiety, the amygdala on the side, looking for threats. Whenever you begin problem-solving, taking the next right step, anxiety begins to diminish. One of my good friends, Brian, was very, very involved for 35 years plus in the 12-step movement. One of his things was always what's the next right step? Whenever you're swimming in anxiety, you're worried, what's the next right thing you can do right in front of you right now? And then start with that, take the next step. When you feel overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, this thing, I don't know, what can I do? It's if there was something you could do, what's the next right move you could make in this moment? And that's a way to start to short circuit anxiety and get back to problem solving. And that's where you want to live, in the frontal cortex. This is a very famous curve in psychology called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, looking at stress. And again, stress, if you don't have stress, you don't have Michael Jordan, you don't have Michelangelo, you don't have, Elon Musk building like rocket ships. You need some stress. Stress is, it fuels creativity and production, and it makes us rise to occasions. With stress, we can do great things. But there's a point where stress is at this point of productivity and it's useful, called eustress. Then we get too much stress and we get into distress. And I've seen students on both sides of the curve. And with motivation, I've seen kids who were not stressed enough, who were unplugged, didn't care, didn't see the benefit of it. And then they were, not putting in the energy to actually accomplish things. But a lot of anxiety is there's too much stress, typically, too much arousal. And you're perceiving things as a threat. Do I have the resources to manage this? If I don't feel so, this can hurt me. I'm scared now. But that appraisal is subjective. It can change and shift. That's what therapy is about, helping you move from I'm afraid of what are my resources. And so part of the work with anxiety is teaching kids it's okay to have things you're worried about. It's okay to have some stress hormones, some cortisol. It's okay to have some repetitive thoughts. You can still be highly functional and accomplish things even with some worry. So again, it's I'm anxious, I have anxiety versus I'm a little bit worried, I have some stress. How you frame it, I think, does matter. It can change behaviors. We can learn how to work with stress. But too much fear, again, you deactivate problem solving. I don't trust I can manage it. I'm imagining bad things happening. And we've all seen this. When anxiety kicks in, you've experienced it in your own life. When something happens, you get a diagnosis, you get a thing from work, something happens in a relationship. We've experienced it from suddenly we're in fear. And kids too, suddenly this thing happens and now they're in fear. They're not in trusting what's coming, trusting that they have resources, skills, abilities. Now it's I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen. So the name of the game is things can get really disrupted academically, socially. And one of the key triggers, one of the key indications something's really off is when the basic biology systems start going off. I knew one of my good friends in California, something was really, really wrong when his sleep was getting crazy and he was up at all hours and appetite was off. Things were just wrong and ended up he had a crisis actually, which didn't end very well. But when the basic biology our mammalian systems get off, that's when we're out of healthy functioning and we need some extra help and support. But some of this, when things are, you're trying to control things versus I have some level of trust in myself, trust in my resources and my abilities versus I'm afraid and I feel out of control. And learning to shift from I have to control things to I trust myself and, what can I do in this context? As parents, what can you do when your kids have anxiety? And there's always the balance point of do I get involved, do I help, or do I stand back? And I have a 2-year-old and I'm always going through this, and you have 16, 17-year-olds. And when you have a 35-year-old who's having financial problems or marital problems, or again, how much do I intervene? How much do I let my son or daughter go through their experience? And there's a balance. Because we don't want to get too involved and we don't want to learn helplessness, but also we don't want to have our kids get too hurt. And there's a balance point of the blessing of a skinned knee and a little bit of pain. Okay, they can grow, but too much. We want to keep our kids from really catastrophic events. So you have to watch your kids. How are they managing the stress? Is it healthy or is it harmful ways of managing? Sometimes, kids get into self-harm. About 1 in 5 females will try some self-harm. And this is self-medication. More males get into addiction using, drugs and things to manage anxiety and stress. And part of it, kids may not have a robust range of coping skills or resources. They may copy, imitate peers, take cues from media, things they see. And so it's seeing when they have stress, what are they doing? Are they doing things that are good for them, that are adaptive, or that are harmful to them? In the event you have a kid in crisis, get help, get help, get help. There are times we all need support beyond, our parenting, like when something is really off. I've seen some of my friends in their 40s and their kids had a really hard time in the pandemic. And thankfully they went and got professional support because, sometimes with kids, there things get serious, and same with adults. So there are times the pediatrician is often the first line of defense. They handle most, preliminary, discourses if something seems off. And then social workers, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. And right now they're pretty overburdened. We don't have enough of them, given the current state of mental health for adolescents. So cognitive behavioral therapy, looking at how your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact. DBT, looking at some distress tolerance. How do I manage some discomfort without reaching for something which might shut it down, but also be harmful? And it's a balance between self-acceptance and change. And but learning how to soothe, how to calm oneself down. Because your kids, if they have anxiety now at 15, at 16, they're going to have anxiety in college. They're going to have anxiety in the workplace. They're going to have, it's just part of life. And at some point, we have to begin to learn good coping skills and resources. So teaching them some skills at 16 and 15, at 20, these are life skills that they're going to use their entire lives. So distress tolerance, we need it. Learning how to manage ourselves, our emotions. It's all about self-regulation, not going for a bottle, not going for, I'm going to cut myself to turn down the pain of the emotional pain I'm feeling. I'm not going to do, things that are going to be harmful to myself or others. When your kids express, they're really, really nervous, worried, scared, anxious, talking to them, talking about some of the triggers. In some cases, you can look and can I make the path a little bit smoother and appropriate? If it's school related, can I give them some support academically? If they're overloaded, can I help them reshift the balance? I was talking to a student last week, and she was a freshman up in Michigan, and she had a pretty hefty course load: bio and a lab, chemistry and a lab, calculus, philosophy. And she said, ultimately, this is going to really affect me. And one of the answers was, can we push biology to the summer? And then suddenly bring in a smaller class without a lab. And now it's like her level of stress just came down. So she went from an 8 or a 9 down to about a 6. And that's a better place to be when you're starting freshman year in Michigan. And so if there is too much to the plate, one of my favorite things is, can we reallocate? Can we trim versus just muscle through it? Because again, there can be costs. And also it can just impair their experience of being a high school junior or sophomore or college freshman. I want them to enjoy their experiences versus just getting through it and white knuckling it. There's a way we can reduce the load. And as parents, we can model that there's no race, there's no rush. Sometimes it's okay to scale back from this class to an easier class. And that's a good life skill versus just grin and bear it, get through it. You want to balance, validating your child, validating what is valid. That's a big part of DBT. And their feelings are valid. How they feel is real. They may have some perceptions that are inaccurate, but validate the feelings for sure to make sure they feel heard and seen. Something is valid in there, and don't shut them down if you can help it, or you lose the ability to work with them, and they see you as you don't get me. And often there is a tension between teenagers and parents, where you don't get me becomes a bit of a mantra as they're separating from you as parents. They're individuating, and their peers become more important than you in some cases, which is part of their natural development and growth. It's not taking that personally. It's just what mammals and how we do it as Homo sapiens. But part of it is the more they can sense that maybe mom does get me a little bit, or dad, you have currency with them, you can work with them, and you're a way to, they have to have that trust. It's really important. As a coach, I have to have the trust also, but I don't have the same dynamic as you do as parents. And sometimes your kids really won't talk to you. And I've heard parents say this: they will not listen to me. Jed, if you say it, they'll listen to, but for me, I can't say it. There's a filter up that mom doesn't know a thing, and dad doesn't know anything. And then in that case, make sure they're talking to someone who can help them and work with them, and try to meet them where they are, try to talk to them whenever you can. However, in terms of anxiety, sometimes it shows up socially. They're not comfortable, they're not developing the same way. They're especially, some double D kids. And if they start coming towards you, like they were at 16, 17, they want more time with you, don't push them away. Don't be worried that they're going to be missing out or going to be socially ill-equipped. Let them in, create fun things to do with them. And often, when you're riding to and from places, when you really can connect and have those talks when the guard comes down in transit. Giving kids permission to say no if the kids feel overwhelmed. If they just want to lay around some, play music, don't be nervous that they're missing out, or it's okay when there are seasons for development. And sometimes kids need to come back and retrench some and recenter if there's a lot happening in their lives and their worlds. So social anxiety, encouraging students if they have that. Sometimes bringing a friend is helpful. My daughter's going to school and she brings Peppa the pig, her little stuffed animal, and it's a safety object. And it's something that, helps her with, it's an attachment object. So it helps her feel comfortable. And having a friend, having someone you trust, someone can really be helpful if you have social anxiety. And going early, getting yourself comfortable, your body in a new place can be very helpful too. Sometimes anxiety, their kids aren't making it up. If there's an anxious young person, there's probably an anxious parent or grandparent in the mix. So much of anxiety is genetic. And part of it, siblings can share half of their DNA or only a third of their DNA or 2/3 of their DNA. So even if one sibling is very calm and chill, one could be very anxious, but they're getting their genetics information from a different parent or grandparent. So that's how meiosis works. And so the grand scheme, if your kid's anxious, it's probably not their invention. And the family connection, parents, if you have an anxious kid, it may be beneficial for you to look at your own levels of anxiety, how you're modeling for your kids. Are you doing your own work to manage yourself, your fears? I've seen kids get really turned up on anxiety with academics and performance, and they're worried about scholarships or getting into colleges. And then one of their parents is also having the same thing. And the kids are like copper. They just feel what their parents are feeling often. And you can't give your kids more than what you have. You can't nurture your kids more than your own work. So part of it, if you want to help your kids do their work, you have to do your own work. That's an important concept for anxiety. And self-nurturing, kids can learn about how to take care of themselves, taking hot baths or tea or quiet spaces or music or soft clothes, whatever it is. You do something to manage your, when you feel sad or stressed, overwhelmed, and having kids learn to do these things versus let me go and numb out, which is a very common way to handle. Let me go and do high levels of drinking. Let me turn off my frontal cortex. Let me smoke something. Let me drink something. Let me cut something. Let me do something to turn this feeling off versus let me nurture myself. And it's helping kids learn these adaptive skills versus the maladaptive skills. And again, teaching them it's normal, having stress, having some worry, having some anxiety, joy, sorrow, it's part of the human experience. You're not broken or flawed. This is just, it means you're human, there are different chapters in life. Share your stories about times when you were nervous, anxious, make them feel okay and not broken or damaged for having these feelings. Modeling coping skills. They're going to watch you. Forget what you say. It's what you do that really matters. And if you're showing them modeling, taking deep breaths, going for a walk, meditating, self-care, your kids are going to see all of this. They pick up on your positive and not positive approaches to managing your anxiety. And there's a whole thing of if you're getting really anxious, you're really into self, well, both depression and anxiety, you're in your own sphere, in your own energy, you're saturating your own energy. So part of it is getting out of your own stuff. Helping someone else can be a huge way to calm down these centers of depression and anxiety when you're really getting self-centered, so that you can't see beyond yourself and your own fears, worries. Helping someone else who's going through their own stuff helps you put it in context. So if there's ever a way to do any kind of volunteer work, other thing, that's a way to help manage anxiety. There's some great books. Dan Siegel, fabulous doctor, researcher on anxiety. He talks very clearly about the prefrontal cortex and the balancing, how it helps calm the amygdala using GABA and the neurochemicals. And I talk to my students about this. I talk about the amygdala, that little almonds, that fear-based part that's scanning for threats, and how to get back to the front of the cortex. And so that's helpful. Self-talk is a big deal because anxiety is sustained by self-talk. And that's the engine, the fuel. What are you telling yourself? What's your dialogue telling you? Is it saying, oh God, it's going to be so terrible. Oh, it's over. And so your inner dialogue really matters. That's kind of the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy. Your cognitions inform your behaviors and your feelings. And monitoring, if kids start talking, it's going to be so terrible. Oh God, like be careful about their overgeneralizations, their irrational beliefs. If I don't have this outcome, it's all going to be over. Everything falls apart. If I don't get this role in the school play, it's finished. If I don't get into this college, it's over. If I don't get this grade on the AP exam. And they're going to have black and white thinking. And you want to move people away from that because that in and of itself creates anxiety. Whenever you have that kind of dichotomous either or black and white thinking, that is fuel for anxiety. So you want to help correct. Adler would say you spit in the soup. You help kind of redirect them. You want to help kids shift from external comparisons of where so-and-so is and am I going to be where she is or my sibling, or get it back on themselves, less external, because being more externally referential creates anxiety. And females, we know, are much more aware of where they are in the pecking order academically. And part of their own anxiety is knowing where they are, where they fit. Guys are a little bit more oblivious in many cases, not all guys, but on average, in terms of like the social hierarchies and things like that. and the academic hierarchies. And so help move kids away from the right outcome to there's a range of outcomes. Some are better than others, but there's no catastrophe. Ellis would say, be careful of catastrophizing or masturbation. This has to be this way, or awfulizing if this doesn't happen. Help get them back. There's a range of outcomes. Some I prefer. I prefer this, but if it's happened, it's not the end of the world. And that's Albert Ellis, one of the founders of Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, REBT. Help them modify their extreme irrational beliefs. That's not therapy. Help them find their inner coach that calms them down. Because right now, as parents, you can help be this source of insight, wisdom, if they'll allow it. You have experience they don't have. You have more life behind you. But your voice, hopefully, they eventually begin to internalize, and it becomes their introject. They begin to hear your voice when they're at college, and you aren't there, but some of your voice echoes. It's the inner coach, because we all have to talk ourselves down. We all have things that scare us. And how do we talk ourselves down? It's the inner coach. How do we calm ourselves down? Can we access the wise adult, the wise inner parent that's internalized? Or is it the critic and the fear-based stuff will come on, and which voice is going to govern your inner landscape? When you begin to think about problem solving, what's the next right thing? You start moving away from fear. And, if you're swimming, just do something, even awkwardly, to begin making it better versus I'm going to swim in the fear. One thing about anxiety and fear is, you feel like you don't have the ability, or you're nervous. Do I have the resources? So part of it is experiencing yourself as effective, as self-efficacious. It can help you lower anxiety. When you have some success, I can do this. Like if someone has a terror of public speaking and they have a thing coming in a month or two, giving them some small wins early, they begin to experience themselves as effective, then the levels of anxiety decreases. So success lowers anxiety, and you can help them create some by lowering the bar in some way. Different ways of managing anxiety. These are just therapeutic tricks, techniques more than tricks. Helping externalize the anxiety monster, giving it an external form or name, or that's Murray the worry, and Murray's job is to worry, and there's Murray again. So it's not, that's me and my fears. That's a voice. That's not necessarily me. That's part of me, but I can give it a name. And if you can name it, you can tame it. That's a concept that ultimately, if I can create some cognitive distance, that's this thing, that's Murray the worry, not I'm flawed. That's just this little figure, which always gives me negative things. You may have other domains of competence. Some kids who have a lot of anxiety, you ask them, is there any other place in your life where you have stress and you manage it? What do you do? And one student said, well, if I have a big game, I get worked up and a lot of arousal and stress. So I go for a run and then I feel more centered. So can we bring that to this condition, this context? The body, I am a firm believer in the integration of the mind and the body as a way of managing anxiety, because they are the same. We are, there's embodied cognition, embodied emotion. Our bodies are tied to everything. Some very simple techniques, which you can take these away. You can look them up after our talk. Tapping is a very, very simple technique. You can learn it in a matter of a couple minutes. You can Google tapping, emotional freedom technique. It's a way to calm down the body when you're hyper aroused. And I do this, and whenever I do it, it takes me 10 seconds and I begin to feel better. You tap the karate chop point in your hand. You might say my anxiety, my arousal. You tap it about 20 times. Then you tap these little points. The inside of the eye, 7 times. The outside of the eye. You can do it now with me if you want. It's very simple. Under the eye, under the nose, under the chin, the collarbone, under the arm, and then top of the head, about 7 times. And when I do that, I feel more relaxed. And there's clinical research on this showing other forms of relaxation. Like this actually helps people with PTSD. This tapping is so simple. We don't fully understand the meridians, but there's something to it. We also know that breathing is tied to anxiety. I just saw my 2-year-old daughter have a massive, 2-year-old mini tantrum about someone being on her pillow for bedtime, and her breathing got really, really shallow. And she was, when you have a tantrum, like you can imagine your kids were 2, that really short, rapid breathing. When you get this slow, when I was telling her, take a deep breath, slow down. And I was showing her, and I was pacing myself, she could begin to see this nice slow breathing, that kind of thing. So the diaphragm, what's happening with breathing we now have evidence, and we can put people in MRI scans and track blood flow. The diaphragm is going back and forth and stimulating this thing called the vagus nerve. The vagal nerve, it's the vagal means wandering, the vagus, and it goes from the head down to the heart, down to the gut, down all the way down. And that the diaphragm, that slow stimulation helps activate the parasympathetic calming nervous system, which lowers blood pressure. With respiration, your body calms down, you lower stress hormone. So deep breathing, I mean, I can see what's happening under them, putting people in scanners and their brains are changing. So showing your kids how to breathe slowly, the hold, the breathing out from your diaphragm, your belly goes out, you hold, and showing your kids, teaching them, it's a great to have this skill. Having a minute for mindfulness, I really love. There's an app I use called Waking Up. I was playing it yesterday and I was doing meditation, and it just helps me. Little 12-minute meditations, learning how to observe your emotions, observe and without judgment and attachment. So you get more of a hold of your mental states. So kids at 15, 16 can learn some mindfulness. It's very basic and very helpful in this age of anxiety. It's very, very simple. And the Waking Up app, I pay for that every year. Anything contemplative, any kind of yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, meditation, good stuff. It's a way to help lower anxiety levels. So if your kids have any interest, encourage it. I think some schools do it. I think it's fabulous, learning how to use breathing and slowing things down. Exercise is a phenomenal way to lower anxiety levels. We have ample evidence. It pops so many good neurotransmitters, your endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. There's lowered rates of depression and lower rates of cortisol, the stress hormone. So if your kids are getting stressed, get them out there, get them running, get their hearts up, and that'll help anxiety levels. And sleep. When you're not getting enough sleep, you are going to be more anxious, period, paragraph. Your ability to manage your emotions, to regulate your startle reflex. When you're sleeping, you clear out toxins. It's also tied to memory consolidation. But if you're not sleeping, your emotions are going to be a hot mess, period, paragraph. Nature is really, really good for lowering levels of anxiety. And there's a whole thing of nature, we're being starved of nature hunger. That part of it has to do with like the diffuse focus, looking at a forest or looking at a water, and you're not looking at any one thing, and that helps your brain just relax. There's no singular sharp focus, and it's just nice being out there, even seeing a picture of nature, hearing water bubbling. I like sitting next to a tree and just kind of resting my head against the tree, and it's very grounding, it's very calming. Additionally, human connection lowers anxiety, and there's a theory that one of the reasons we have so much more anxiety now is the disconnection that's caused by our devices. Only a theory, there's back and forth, but we know that when we have long touch or stroking of the afferent nerves, like with your, it's like giving someone a hug, that lowers levels of cortisol, and it pops something called oxytocin, which is, a bonding, which is very, very positive for us. And oxytocin seems to make the amygdala less reactive to stimuli. So giving someone a good long hug or petting your dog, physical touch is very, very helpful. Your food matters. Eating a bunch of garbage, a bunch of sugar puts you on the path versus healthy eating, omegas and a good balance of fiber and proteins, and hydration helps us with our emotional regulation for sure. A very simple thing I do myself, I've learned, it's called havening. And again, if you look at how mammals calm themselves, if there's a rat gets startled, the mom is going to like lick it in a repetitive motion. Remember when you had a baby and you'd rock them or you'd calm them, you'd pat their back. So someone's upset, you come, they're crying, they had a loss, you kind of calmingly touch them. And that is, we have a series of afferent nerves, which that slow stroking motion gives signals to calm the body down. We are just hardwired for that to help us. So havening is, let's just use that. And you have the thing you're thinking about, and you do this series of repetitive motions of your head for like, 20 seconds. And you can, again, Google the word havening, there are videos. Palm havening is back and forth again. And then I like this one, my favorite is the arm one. It's back and forth, up and down. It's calming and it's very self-soothing. So again, you're learning a technique versus let me grab a bottle and numb out. It's let me calm myself down in this nice positive way. I also use an app, HeartMath, is about heart rate variability, HRV, and learning how to calm yourself. One thing I do is put my hand on my chest, and even that little basic touch, and I breathe into my hand. And I imagine like energy is going through, and I imagine someone I love, something I'm grateful for, And that can calm me down if my thoughts are really racing and I'm nervous about something. So HeartMath solution, you can Google them as well. They have videos, they have books. Some people really benefit from having, I think that I used to have a stone I would carry in my pocket when I would go and give big lectures. Now I'm kind of calm with big lectures, but some people have rosaries, things they can hold, and it just helps them ground. And there could be a certain figure you imagine or a shape you imagine, and you invoke an inner coach. How would this person respond? And it's called neural priming. By thinking about how they would think, it helps change my pattern of thinking. So that's the beauty of an internal construct. Jung would say it's like, your inner king or inner queen or an inner wise figure, the senex, the old wise figure within us. Journaling can help us lower anxiety levels, pretty basic. You lower rumination, and you also enhance performance in many areas. Be mindful of how much news you're getting. If news is causing the fear, there's times for a news fast where you limit it, and not first thing in the morning, ideally. And sometimes it's better to turn off the internet. There are people who turn off the router at night. It's on a system like your Google Home. You can do that, taking internet breaks. And then freeing up space. Sometimes you want to balance priorities and there's too much happening. What can I pare down? I want to make sure there's time for balance and stimulation, the whole balanced life. And if you're out of balance, you feel often anxious if certain parts of you aren't being attended to. And balance can be shifting and evolving and dynamic. If you're overscheduled, if you're not getting enough sleep, that's going to affect levels of anxiety. And one of the nice things is cutting down. I help my student in Michigan. Let's take bio in the summer. Let's do it. Let's make the semester easier. And then anxiety just naturally comes down. And she was trying to figure out, do I want to do the soccer? They have to practice a bunch, but I'm also looking at the consulting clubs or a business fraternity. And, is soccer getting in the way? Well, is there a way to get a pickup game and move your body without having all the practices? We're trying to figure out a way. In my role as an EF coach, I'm helping kids with executive functioning and how do I lessen the load so your body is more in balance. So our friends are really important. If your kids aren't spending enough time with their friends, they're probably going to be more anxious. So encourage those relationships, encourage real connection. In person is always better than online. And having kids learn how to find things they love to do, things that make them happy, and broaden your definition of success. So it's not just academics, performance, college. I want to have a healthy, adaptive, resourced, thriving, resilient kid. And that's my goal here, not a 3.8 and not this college. So vulnerability, honesty, and all these good things. All right. How are we doing time-wise? 8:38. I'm going a little bit late on this one. Technology, just be mindful. If there's too much, talk to your kids about how their device use is helping or hurting them, making them more or less anxious or depressed. If they're trying to perform, they're trying to get likes. It can be helpful to connect with friends, but also is scrolling to people and getting, looking at their lives makes us feel worse about ours typically. And so talk to them. How do you feel? Are you avoiding something by looking at this or Instagram? Are you putting off things that are more important? Help kids make those connections for themselves and make sure that they're not spending so much time that it's squeezing out sleep, exercise, other friendships, and so forth. Because our friendships are the most important thing, and kids need those. And when they go to college in a couple of years, their friends are their lifelines. If they get really isolated, that's when they're going to get in trouble. They may want to transfer out or come back home. I've worked with kids, and I've seen all that. So, all right. So that was anxiety. That was a pretty big part of the talk. Hopefully, there's still room for motivation. I think there actually is. And motivation, when kids have, they're twice exceptional, ADHD, kids have, other learning differences, looking at their resources, their strengths, limitations. They may have limits in terms of their attention. Make sure there's a smart schedule for kids like that. They're, in terms of achieving things, motivating to accomplish things, they're starting, persisting, and completing. I'll talk about those three areas. At the beginning, getting started. Some kids have a hard time getting started, especially if they have anxiety or their perfectionism. They're worried they can't do a good job. They may put off starting it. And so, they may delay. So you want to, first thing is to figure out, are they putting it off for what reason? Are they just distracted? They're looking at their phone. Are they disorganized? They don't know where to begin. Things are a mess. Is it, I don't care? It's helping on, or is it in terms of I'm having a hard time managing my environment and my work? That is executive functioning. That's EF. And so there are many reasons why my delay starting something. Motivation. I'm worried I'm not going to do well on this task. I don't have any value. I don't have any interest in this. I'm afraid of failure. I think I'm not going to do well. Or there are so many competing things. It's gonna getting washed out. So there also is perfectionism, that kids are, if it's not perfect, I don't want to do it. Or I'm afraid if I try and don't do well, it reflects badly upon me. Or there are skills I'm lacking and I don't want to start because I'm nervous that I don't have what it takes to finish this topic. So getting at the root cause of procrastination is really, really helpful and beneficial. So it's important for kids say, oh, this is stupid, or Spanish is stupid, science is stupid, whatever, calculus is dumb. Who cares? And oftentimes that comes from they're trying to protect their self-esteem. And often I read that as, oh, you feel like you can't do well in this subject. This is stupid means I'm worried I don't have the ability or resources to do well. And I don't want to be humiliated or embarrassed by that. And so it's better for me to say it's stupid, it's irrelevant as a self-protective device. It's like an ego protection, essentially. And part of it, can I help them achieve some level of success so they believe I have the resources and to do better. And there may be, again, these skill deficits, and if they're not motivated, I read that as they're missing certain skills. That's one of the major things. And if we give them some success, and I'm not interested in this topic means I'm worried I don't have the ability to do well. That's often a thing. So we can help kids with EF support if they seem with motivation. Can I help them managing, motivating, prioritizing, again, like reducing things, what's the most important thing for tomorrow, is walking them through that in terms of prioritization, especially kids with ADHD. They're doing stuff, but often isn't the right thing. They don't take the moment to plan, that 5 minutes in the front end to actually stop and plan, versus if you have an impulsive type ADHD, they jump in, they're doing something, but the wrong thing at the wrong time. So learning how to scaffold, how to stop, how to structure, and that 5 minutes on the front is essential. And that's where I help a lot of my students how to prioritize and plan before they just jump right in. Executive functions of planning. If you have ADHD, you're going to have challenges in certain areas: time management, self-regulation, planning, prioritization, organization. So as parents, we can support them. You could hire an EF coach, someone to outsource it at some level and be a scaffold. But the ADHD kids are going to have some of these areas, inhibiting distractions, and so forth. So, time management is one of the big ones. How much time will you need for this? How much help will you need? The level of awareness of what you need. And again, kids who are low in executive functioning often appear as unmotivated, but it really is they're missing skills. And the low effort is they don't believe that they need certain help. So skill building, helping kids break through the inertia, helping kids understanding planning is huge for EF kids. Rehearsing the steps of what will this take? What do you need to accomplish this task? Breaking things down to small tasks versus some big thing. I don't know how to handle this. Like, what's the first right thing I have to do? The first small step to take. Your environment matters a ton. So that's one thing I talk about. If you get your environment right, you're solving a lot for motivation and starting and task initiation and so forth, and persistence. Organizing your digital space, turning your phone off or charging it. How many distractions are coming at you, which can really affect your ability to get things done. Engineering your environment is a big deal. I love the book James Clear wrote, Atomic Habits. And one of his big things was like, your environment matters so much, even more than your desire. Having a good, study area. If you need music, if you need chewing gum, those are things I use all the time when I study, when I focus, when I work. Making sure you don't have things pinging you all the time, turn those down. I have kids who charge their phones in the kitchen when they're working, which is great. And make what's hard easy and what's easy hard. So if you have a game you want to play, right, put a timer on it. For me, I have time limits. I found myself in the past couple of months getting really sucked into this game. Everyone plays Wordle. My wife and I moved on from Wordle to New York Times Spelling Bee. And I found that trying to get to Genius and then trying to get Queen Bee, there are times I would spend an hour. And now I have it locked down. I have an app on my computer called Stay Focused. After 10 minutes on that website, I'm locked out for the day. So I know I have to get it done, and I can't, because for me, and for many of your kids, the brain wants to downgrade to a lower level cognitive task. If you're doing a hard thing, the brain often it's hard to think. And so I want to downshift to something that's easier. Rather than writing my article, I want to go and look for cabinet pulls for the kitchen. For me, I'd rather look at words on spelling bee than do the important thing, eat the frog. So part of it is versus me saying, I'm going to have willpower. My environment does it for me. And now the environment, just 10 minutes, it's locked out, bam. And I have my students do the same thing with their phones. There are screen time limits you can put on apps at a certain time where they turn off. I have 10 minutes and then it's locked down for the day, or I can ask for more time. But use your environment, use clocks and watches and timers. Kids who have a bad sense of timing. I have some students who would take a break for 10 minutes, but that 10 minutes will become an hour. Use your alarm, use your timers. It's really helpful. Helping establish routines is, motivation. If you have it on, if it's routinized, it takes away the effort and the energy. It's what I do on this time of this day. Finishing a task as part of motivation is getting help when you need it. One of the most important things for motivation is when I need support, can I get it? And having the humility to go and getting help. Kids who are, neurodiverse, triceptional, they may need some more support, and being able to go and find who could help me at the right time, the right way. Sometimes having deadlines that are artificial deadlines, so you're not scrambling at the end to help you finish things. And what's motivating for many kids is having a checklist. Well, my student at Michigan, she says, she has this thing called Canvas, which is a digital platform for her assignments, but she has a paper planner. And I have also a student in Colorado, the same thing, and they're crossing things off, and it's motivating and reinforcing as you're crossing off your tasks over the course of a day. So motivation, kids are motivated, but often they're motivated in different ways. So I could be motivated to be tied to my friends socially, which is a bigger driver for me at this moment than doing my science homework. And understanding that there's an idea that every behavior is motivated, which I think that's right. We're moving towards something, or away from this, but towards other thing, this game, this social activity, whatever it is. And when I'm working with motivation for a student, I want to find out, what their values are, what they care about. Sometimes what the parents care about is different than what the kids care about. And I want to find out what's important to you. What do you want for right now and in a couple of years? And sometimes I shift my approach based on what the kids actually want for themselves. There's a great theory of motivation at Rochester in Maryland, DC and Ryan. These guys are giants in the field of psychology and motivation, that all humans have a need and a desire to feel competent, a desire to have some autonomy, some choice, and connection. We need to connect with others, to feel that we can do things, and to have some choice. So if kids are not motivated, I want to see, can I give them some choice in the smallest thing of what they do, when they do it, what they do first, what music they play. I try to be as minimally controlling as I can, and I'm more about choice and connection, giving feedback and validation. That's that relationship part. And competence, having some wins, some success. And when you have wins, it drives future motivation. And there's a frame of, if this kid, would just try harder, he'd do better. And Richard Lavoie said, no. If this kid had some success, then he would do better and try harder. And that's also from Albert Bandura at Stanford. So creating some success, lowering the bar some, and then you like the fuel for motivation, the fire for motivation. If the kid's really stuck and checked out, you can get involved, provide some scaffolding, but the minimal. Don't get too involved. Stay back as far as you can, and then pull back the scaffold once they're really rocking and rolling. Don't take it over. That's a key thing. Helping kids with goal setting is really important for motivation. Short-term goals are more motivating than these long-term distal goals. When you accomplish this little thing you set, that's reinforcing. Let me do more. Smart, they're specific, they're measurable, they're timely, and so forth. I always help kids with motivation on going towards something versus I want to avoid something. With kids, I don't want to fail this class. No. I want to get a 75 or above. And that tiny reframe has consequences in terms of behavior, persistence, other things. So help the kids move towards, it's called an approach versus an avoidant orientation, very basic motivational reframe. Talk about the purpose of what they're doing, like this task, how it might be beneficial to themselves, but also maybe to others. The long-term, this could help somebody. If you can align what you're doing with, there's some beneficial effect to you or your family or others, that can be motivating. Parents, you can have high expectations and be supportive, nurturing parenting. And there's some research, Dave Yeager and Jeff Cohen, there was a couple sections of psychology 101, freshman college, two cohorts, one section, they both did a paper, and the professors in this section said, I'm giving you these comments in your paper, so you'll have feedback. That's it. And the other condition, they said, I'm giving the comments because I have high expectations and I know you can reach them. And then the kids were allowed to go in and revise their papers for a higher grade. In the control group, I'm giving you feedback for feedback, about 4 out of 10 kids revise their papers. In the I believe you can achieve great things group, 8 in 10 kids do. So when kids know someone believes in them, that affects their behaviors. So as parents, you tell your kids you believe in them, but also giving them good feedback when you see them doing the right thing. Don't tell them they're brilliant, they're smart, but the way you're working, the way you're focusing, like really praise the process. That's from Carol Dweck, Cheer Up Mindset. That's a really great book. When your kids have successes, pay attention to them. Don't let them write it off and say, oh, it was easy, I got lucky. Say, no, you did this thing. Your energy, your effort, your focus paid off in this way. Make sure they're attending to the connection between their inputs, their behaviors, and the outputs. Don't ever let them write it off as, oh, that was luck or whatever. Make sure they understand what they did. And that's where the idea of the locus of control, the language of attribution and control, of how your behaviors are tied to the outcomes, not luck, not other things. Direct them to what they're doing. And the other things of motivation, language of possibility. If someone seems really frustrated, I've historically always had a hard time with math. Say, are you open to the possibility of becoming better at math? Our brains are very plastic. We can get smarter. We can shift. We can learn. Are you open to the possibility, which is language that I like, of you, doing better in Spanish? There's also a thing of commitment, and this is Cialdini, researcher, I think, out of the Midwest. That commitment. And then if I ask my kids, can you have the homework done by Thursday? Like, I'll try. And I say, can you commit to having it done, Tim? And then if they commit to it, it's a tiny little language shift, but it locks in some notion of the self. And oftentimes, and especially a written commitment, that's the whole thing about commitment, escalation. When you write something down, it activates certain parts of the brain, the psyche. You're more likely to do it than when you say it passingly. It's also a thing helping kids with motivation of mental contrasting, having if-then statements. If I get distracted by my TV, then I'm going to wait until after. If I spend over an hour on my phone, I'm going to lock my phone in the kitchen. Having if-then statements to help if they, having the kind of pre-planning. Then self-regulating your motivation, self-consequencing, like, self-rewarding. If I finish these 3 chapters, then I can do this on Instagram. If I don't, then I'm putting the phone away. Learning how to self-consequence. And then when there are setbacks, part of it's framing it as, what did you learn from that? That's a big thing with grit and resilience and long-term motivation of not, setbacks are part of the process. And when you have failures, setbacks, and you recover, you become stronger, more resilient in the future. That was the Bruce Jenner comment, that you learn how to bounce back. So failures are okay. And we need practice falling down. There's a notion of desirable difficulties. That some setbacks are part of growth, part of the process. Frustration is how we learn. And so we can't take it all away and take it over and swoop in and save our kids. Sometimes they have to work through things as they build the muscle and grit for long-term performance and so forth. So Appleruth Tutoring, where we live, at the intersection, the science of learning and the art of human connection. I'm going to pause for a moment. And Albert, I'm going to ask you to start a poll. It'll take you all of 20 seconds. So I'll know who you are. Are you a student, a parent, a guardian, an educator, like. If you have a kid, and then college, junior, freshman, sophomore. And what we do test prep, academic tutoring, and EF coaching. And then do you want any help? Do you want someone to reach out to you? If you do, click a thing. If not, that's it. That was the poll. All right. And so again, our services, we help kids with grades, with test preparation, and with EF coaching. That's what I mostly do for my work with my students. We have 3 more lectures coming up that are like this one. I think it's next week. We have a thing on helping kids study, how to be better at studying. And then the week after that, the 28th, is how to show what you know, how to go in and take a test, or how do you demonstrate what you know academically. I just did a talk last week on how learning works, and the brain and cognition and neurons and so forth. We also have a thing coming up in a couple weeks. A PSAT prep rally for kids is a junior. or a sophomore, we're helping kids, giving free sessions on PSAT practice tests. And we're also, at the school year's beginning, we're giving $100 off if your kids need help with chemistry or physics or EF coaching. We're doing some back to school some discount packages there. Okay. All right. So now I want to shift gears and open up for the Q&A. Are there questions about anxiety or motivation? I know I covered a lot of material. My approach is always give you too much, and then everyone will at least take something away versus giving you a few things. Because I feel like these are pretty complex topics. I mean, I took a class, a 4-month class in motivation, and so you can't fit it into half an hour. But I'm trying to give you some little high notes. Anxiety, again, I've taken coursework as a counselor, and but again, hopefully everyone got something. Are there any questions about your own kids with anxiety or motivation that I can help with? Anything, or any feedback or thoughts or reflections? The Q&A should be open. Is this deck available online? We are going to send you a link. We are going to send you a link to the recording. I think we've changed sharing decks for some, that's kind of been a shift, but you're going to have a durable link to the recording. It's not going to go anywhere. If you watch it again, it'll be there. It was very good. Love the presentation and the detailed slide deck. Thank you. Yeah, I like to deliver lots of good information. That's kind of my thing. I didn't spend 10 years in grad school I want to give you some of that good stuff. Other things. Anything I can help? Any other questions? Or how do we get our kids to ask for help earlier than later? Our senior high school daughter doesn't want support until she's already under the avalanche. And that's part of metacognition. That's part of learning. And again, I want to help her before college. Because I work with kids. I was working with kids who are often failing college. And then they're overwhelmed. And I try to minimize the chaos. And if there's a bunch of chaos, we need some work to do on EF skills, on planning, strategizing, prioritizing. And so part of it, it's going to be discourse dialogue, checking in, more frequent check-ins, earlier check-ins with your kid. She doesn't want support, and reframing help and support, not as a weakness, but as a strength, and sharing stories about how you get help and how it, ultimately my goal is to minimize stress. And if there's stress, and again, some stress, part of it, but when there's too much stress, when there's chaos, it takes away the pleasure of being a high school senior. It takes away the pleasure of being a college freshman. It's just that when you're at a 9, the joy is gone. And then I need to go and drink or do something else. It's like part of it, helping them learn how to short circuit that. And that's my pact with my kids. When I'm working with them in high school or in college, I want to bring down the level of chaos. And often kids say, I start off okay, and then things start, I dig a hole, and then I spend the last month scurrying up in the hole, and it's super stressful, and I'm exhausted. And my thing is, I want to avoid that. And that's part of that's planning and strategizing and breaking things up. So it's a conversation. Again, sometimes like people do hire coaches, like people at Appleruth, to help them with structuring and planning and framing things so they don't end up in the chaos in that big dip. But you, as a parent, part of it, can you get her to believe that there's value, and you've learned to, maybe when you were a kid or you're early in the workplace, you had big chaos, but now you've learned the structure and schedule, prioritize, plan, knock things off the plate. It really is a conversation. So whether that's with you or someone else, it's helping them have this discourse and them learning this. So when they're in college, they're going to have this resource available to them. And I have a daughter, 15, and doing DBT. It's working, but it's slow. Yeah. But DBT is powerful. Learning how self-acceptance and change, learning some distress tolerance, learning how to manage oneself, one's emotions. This is a huge life skill. And if you have it, it's protective. And it's going to be, learning how to manage yourself is one of the key things, part of our lives. It makes us better available for ourselves and to help others. If my son has 5 homework assignments and has ADHD, what's the best way to break it down? What I do, I have this not in this deck. I sit with my kids and I teach them this. We line everything up and we do estimation of how much time will each one of these things take. Then I do the prioritization, like what is due tomorrow, what has to be done tomorrow, what I can push if need be. Like I'm turning in for a grade, what's not. Then we go through and we rank what's the most cognitively intense, what's the hardest. I want to do the hardest thing first. Never, ever save the most cognitively demanding task for last. put it first, put it early before I do the easier stuff, the more lower cognitive tasks at the end. And then we structure it. Then we say, and then also we build in breaks. So this is 30 minutes, 40 minutes, then break here, 20 minutes, this and this, break here, and then finish up. And then talk, so I build in the breaks, but I want to do the hardest thing first and the most urgent thing first. And when kids understand how to do, I do it very explicitly, but eventually they may do it without having put it on a piece of paper, but I have my kids write it all down. I use a little spreadsheet, but this is teaching them a skill of how to organize and plan and prioritize and time estimate. These are important skills for kids with ADHD. How do you help a child reduce anxiety when a slip up happens to internalize the failure? And they're going to have slip ups and their setbacks, and we're going to have disappointments. They're going to mess up. All my kids mess up. I mess up. If you're married, we all screw up. And so reducing the anxiety is looking at it. It's not the end of the world. Setbacks help them normalize it. And then part of it is, learning from it. My kids all screw up and they get an F or they didn't turn this thing in. How did I miss it? I was due or I screwed up. I step back. I don't come with shame ever. I meet them like, all right, it's okay. There's no shame spiral. Let's learn from this. A setback of failure is a moment to learn. And often it's the richest moment to learn because this shows you weaknesses in their system and their planning. Oh, we checked it later. You didn't log in. We went to work. Next time, how can you improve that? And what if I set a reminder on my phone? What if I do a thing? What if I ping myself before I go to work and check in? And so part of it is no stigma, no shame, but treating these setbacks and failures as gems for learning. And even like celebrating, it's the good stuff. Now we can help improve the system versus feeling any kind of shame or feeling less than. So help reframe setbacks. That's Carol Dweck's work and on mindset, a growth mindset versus you made a mistake, it revealed that you're not good enough. The growth mindset, there's room for mistakes. So that takes away some of the fear of mistakes. And the way you respond matters too. Mistakes, they happen and I screw up too. Make sure the kids know it's part of the human process. Our 15-year-old began working with an EF coach and she thinks it's stupid and not going to help. Do we need a different coach or do we ask her to keep trying? Is it pretty common? Yeah. You need to have the therapeutic alliance, the fit. And again, the same as some kids, I tell them the exact same thing as parents tell them, but sometimes there's a filter up because the kids have to individuate and need separation from mom and dad. They can't hear it from mom and dad. They can from me. But ultimately, in the event they can't hear it from me for whatever reason, let me find a different person who they can hear it from. I'm not the best coach for everybody. You may need someone else. I mean, I try to modulate and adapt and fit, but there are people I can't help. And then part of it's having some humility. And like, you do better with Jennifer. You do better with John. And we have other people. We have a team of 30 EF coaches. So can we trade up? Same thing with a tutor. Same thing with professors. So there's some fit issues, which may not be anyone's fault. It's just, okay, let's try with a different chemistry. And so you could kind of keep going, but it could be this EF coach isn't the best fit for your kid. So I'm very open, even like looking for a therapist. I did therapy work, I went through 5 therapists before I found the one that I fit with. Like, I can work with you and I want to work with you. It's really learning empowerment, learning how to discriminate and trust yourself. And if they go through, try 1 or 2 more coaches, if it turns out this is all dead to me, I don't want to do this. Okay, I honor that. I validate that. But yeah, can we try one more time? And then what specifically about this coach isn't working? Are they condescending? Are they too social, not social enough? Are they lame? Are they not fun? Do you not respect them? I try to understand what's happening, because again, this relationship, I mean, the rapport is everything. And without rapport, there's no way to really build or communicate or convey skills. Do you support high school students outside the USA and Canada? And if so, can we contact you? Of course. Yeah, we work with kids all over the world. And so we have coaching for students all over the country, internationally as well. And it's not going to be with me. My dance card's actually full, but again, we have 30 coaches. I've done a lot of trainings with them. And I have, 5, 6 kids I work with, but also I do lots of work with other areas. I write, I teach. So the answer is yes, we have coaching all over the place. All right. I think I've knocked out all the questions. It's 9:05. Are there any other questions before we wrap it up for the night? And we will share with you a copy of the deck. Copy of the presentation. a recording. That was the right word. Sorry about that. And that'll be available to you to go through it again. I think that's it, y'all. Well, everybody, thanks for coming out. If you need any help in any of these ways, please reach out. We are here as a resource. And everybody, have a great night.